Hi everyone, my name is Uli, and today I want to talk to you about Envelope. It's the new GraphQL plugin system for your GraphQL servers. I'm a member of a group called the Guild. We're the largest organization in the GraphQL open source world. We develop many libraries. You probably use them already and use them in the past. We develop all of them in a certain principle in mind, and all of them are combining into a platform. But the philosophy is that each product is individual by itself. So you probably heard about GraphQL code generator that we maintain and created, GraphQL tools and schema stitching, GraphQL mesh, which helps you take basically any API out there and convert it automatically into GraphQL, GraphQL inspector to prevent breaking changes, GraphQL modules to separate your schema development between different teams. And many others. And because you probably heard about these individual tools, I want you to, if you haven't heard about the whole platform or haven't heard about all of our tools, I urge you to go to our website and check it out because it will probably be beneficial for you. Our philosophy is that we develop these tools individually by themselves, and each tool is under a person's name and contributor's name. We think it makes it more maintainable and more sustainable, but it doesn't mean that you need to give up on the full experience and the full platform. So I really urge you to check all these tools together to learn what you might be missing. Now, while we were working on all these tools, another thing is that we're not developing something that we don't need or just for an idea or just for marketing. We just try to find things that are missing for us while we work with clients and large organizations, and we try to fill the gap. Usually we try to first contribute, but sometimes if we can't contribute or the contribution is not being, the library itself that we try to contribute to is not accepting it for whatever reason, maybe it's not well maintained or something like that, then we will go on and create a new library. And last year, came to the same process, and we saw a lack and a need for us as GraphQL developers, and we couldn't contribute this to any other place, so we tried, and that's why we created Envelope. So today I'm going to go back to the process of what we actually were thinking while we were thinking about this issue, and how we came about to the solution. So first of all, I want us to kind of rethink again, what do we actually want from a GraphQL server? It sounds maybe like an easy question, but let's dive deep a bit. So what is GraphQL? What we see here is like the traditional GraphQL solution. I showed that slide in many of my talks. We send a query from a client into the GraphQL server, we call it. And then that GraphQL server basically distributes that query between all kinds of different functions that call different sources and bring us back one response in the shape that we want. And that's GraphQL for us, right? And if we look at actually GraphQL JS's main function, what we see is that it has a few steps. It validates the schema first to make sure that the schema that we send it is validated and is correct. Then we parse the query. We actually make sure that we try to understand from the query, from the syntax of it and the string, what we actually want to do. Then we validate them together, that they fit, and then we actually do the execution, which is what we see here. So basically, here is a slide about the execution itself. Again, let's imagine that this is what GraphQL JS actually does under the hood. So from taking the schema and the resolvers and the query, the GraphQL JS will actually execute it and basically, bring the right resolvers, execute the right resolvers, fetch the right data, and then at the end we'll fill the resulted query that we want to get and send it back to whoever sent that query to. So that's everything here is what GraphQL JS does. And I've done many talks about why this thing could actually be executed anywhere. It could be on the client, and it could be on the server. And that's what GraphQL GS provides us with. So if all of that is what GraphQL GS provides us with, what's left? What do we want from a GraphQL server or a GraphQL server framework? So first of all, GraphQL GS has a certain way of creating the schema and resolvers. But what about if we want to create it in a different way? For example, with SDL tools like SDL first, like GraphQL tools. Maybe you want to use Nexus, maybe type GraphQL, maybe other ways of creating the schema, whatever we want. So we want to get powerful tools for schema creation. Then also, we run it on the server, so we need all kinds of communication handling. Like, maybe we need all kinds of tools around HTTP, routing, WebSockets, maybe serverless deployments and Lambdas and things like that. And we want our server to be able to, bring us all kinds of features around performance, like caching. We want to have traceability, logging, security around the server, and auth, and even better error handling. And we also want the server to actually have like an ecosystem of all these tools. Like we don't want it, there's a whole, we want to be relying on like a powerful ecosystem that we can try all kinds of different solutions with. So that's great, but what do we have today? In the current state of GraphQL servers, at least, in my opinion. So currently what I see, and you can debate me on that, like I would love to actually have lots of debates about that, is the current frameworks that we get with GraphQL are too opinionated, and together with the fact that they're not super actively maintained. I think that if you have a framework and you're very opinionated, you also need to be there and maintain it for the long term when you made a lot of choices for your users, but then the dependencies are getting updated and things are changing. You need to be there, and this combination is very bad in my opinion. And also there's a problem there that you can't really share code with the current solutions. There's frameworks that work with SDL first and GraphQL tools. There's frameworks that works with like code first and Nexus. And those are different frameworks. Instead of just making the schema creation separate, we basically created a whole framework around it, and if I'm going with the framework, I can change and I can make choices, and I can share code across the ecosystem. Also, those frameworks are basically wrapping GraphQL and then wrapping also all the HTTP handling, and gives us very little flexibility, which I'll show later today why it's really important. So I get flexibility even if some frameworks are actually giving me extensions and some kind of event notifications. I can't really dive deep and change the behavior. And for us, the people that maintain like servers in production and in like a bit more advanced handling, this is not enough. And also there's another problem where some of the frameworks, their main aim there is to bring you into their ecosystem. It's not to actually only to solve your problems, but actually to make you use more of the toolings that they could offer you, and kind of like slowly vendor locking you in, even though GraphQL is an open standard that we can build free tools from both sides of the protocol. So we took a step back after, with the current state, and we thought to maybe, what you see here, by the way, is a sketch that Dotan from the guild made when we just started debating this thing, and I'll try to reverse engineer the current thinking. So with GraphQL actually, like we said, it offers us, GraphQL JS itself offers us parse, validate, execute, and subscribe. So those are the functions that what we need from GraphQL itself, GraphQL JS itself. All the rest, there's a lot of tools out there that are best for that job. So what we thought was, let's go back, and what if we take GraphQL JS itself, and then we hook into before and after of each of those resolvers, of each of those functions from GraphQL JS, and we wrap it, and we expose the same API. So theoretically, you could use envelope, this wrapper around GraphQL JS, it has the exact same API as GraphQL GS. So all the tools that work with GraphQL GS will work with Envelope. But we created hooks into the system. So now people can create very powerful plugins and basically customize everything about GraphQL. And now, because those hooks are inside the system and expose the same API, you could share your plugins, your Envelope plugins across any framework. So that's one thing. Another thing is like GraphQL JS expects a schema. So it doesn't matter what schema tool that we create. We could now basically provide to Envelope GraphQL tool schema. We could provide Nexus, Type GraphQL, Apollo Federation, any schema we want, and GraphQL JS will execute it, and Envelope will take care of it. So now we can share all this work and all these tools across the whole ecosystem, not just for one specific framework. And the most important thing is we are basically taking out all the HTTP request pipeline outside of the framework. So now you could use anything. You could use Fastify, Express, you can deploy it on Lambda, on Azure Functions, Cloudflare workers, wherever you want to use it, you can just use it, and you can share all this code between all of these environments. You don't need to wait for the people who maintain the framework to give you access to it or to update their dependencies. You get the full freedom, and you get also the full power of the frameworks that's supposed to do that. Like Fastify does HTTP the best. Let's give Fastify, let's give you the full power to use whatever Fastify gives you. And you can update Fastify whenever you want. So we thought about it, we created it, and this changed all of our development lives since then. We are using it in production for over 6 months now, I believe, in huge deployments with high traffic, and it gave us the option to delete so much code from our clients' code bases, because we finally could share code even though our clients are spanning from, again, different HTTP servers, different environments where they deploy things, and different ways of creating their schema. So what does Envelope give us? First of all, it makes GraphQL capabilities easy, thanks to the fact that you can install powerful plugins. Like what you see here is when I create an envelope, the envelope, this variable getEnvelope will expose the exact same API as GraphQL JS. But now if I want to make it way more performant, I just need to add some plugins. And the plugins are very powerful, but as a user, as a server developer, it's as easy as just adding them to your server. Like what you see here, just with 4 plugins, I can make my out-of-the-box server way more performant. Another thing is that now we have a plugin hub on the website. So there's tons of people from the community that expose plugins, and those plugins, again, can be shared across the whole ecosystem, like persistent queries, using tracing and metrics with Sentry and OpenTelemetry and Apollo, Auth0, and many other tools. So it's really worth exploring that, because until today, a lot of things that used to be very cool conference talks or very cool articles, now you can just use them as plugins in a very easy way. You can finally just solve these things in a very easy way. So we said making hard things easy with plugins, but also we can share all these things across the ecosystem. We could share all these things, and we can deploy an Envelope server to with any HTTP server and any deployment, like Express, Fastify, Netlify, Vercel, Azure Functions, Cloud Workers, everything you can think of, we use it. And you could reuse the same plugins and the same code. And also, again, with any schema builder. So if you want to use Nexus, that's great. If you want to use Type GraphQL or Graphical or Apollo Federation, everything is great. You can reuse all of that and use those plugins easily. And share it also with other teams in your company that has different choices from you. You can still share the main chunk of the work and the standards. And another thing is that we see Envelope as a framework of frameworks. We think that this is actually a new way of, on top of this, we can make choices and create new frameworks that are built on top of these powerful systems. And no matter what your choices are and what framework you use, you can reuse these plugins that will be the main power of the ecosystem. And I think the best context to that is that, or the best thing that happened recently is that Redwood GS, which is a very powerful framework on GraphQL that uses GraphQL, basically decided to migrate from Apollo server as their main core server into Envelope. And you could read in their blog post actually why they did it. And I think the same reason they chose Envelope instead of Apollo server will probably be the same reasons that are good for you, even if you're not using Redwood GS. So I really urge you to check it out. And this is just the start. Redwood is, we worked with them a lot and we helped them a lot and they helped us a lot. But there's more frameworks that are coming. We actually have a big discussion on Apollo server itself, how easy it will be to make Apollo server use Envelope. So you can check out all your favorite server frameworks and start a discussion there, and we would love to help migrate any existing framework into Envelope as well. And another cool thing is that, let's say you decide on some list of plugins that work for your organization, you can now create an envelope of envelopes. So you can share this as a core framework, if you will, across all your organizations, and then each team could add their own plugins into it as well, and customize whatever they want. So this is really cool, and this helps us a lot with a lot of large organizations we work with. Yeah, and the last thing that I think is really cool about that is because we hook into each step of GraphQL GS, we could customize each step. And the really cool thing about that is that we basically created a, let's call it Babel for GraphQL. So like Babel or ES5 to 6, we could start using new capabilities of the system before they were standard. We already do that today with Envelope in GraphQL. We can use tools like one-off, defer and stream, even live queries. I'll demonstrate all of that today, and we use that today in production, even though GraphQL GS is not supporting that yet. So we basically freed ourselves from the slow framework of the frameworks of the ecosystem that are two vendor locking and slow, and we freed ourselves also from GraphQL GS that needs to be slow because it needs to be very thoughtful about what it gets into the spec. So now we're free and we could, run faster and get all the capabilities that we need in production. And all those tools are extremely powerful. I'll show you that very soon. So now let's look at code. I want to actually show you an example app. I'm going to run fast because I don't have tons of time, but you can check all these examples on the Envelope repo itself. Again, it's under each framework or each library is under a person's name. Envelope is under .tan, and under that there's a folder with many, many examples with any framework you need. So let's look at that, at the source code. Okay, so we're going to start building basically a server from scratch. For that, we're going to use GraphQL tools to create the schema. But the most important thing here, you can look at this step and use Nexus or Type GraphQL or whatever you want. So let's just create really quickly a schema, a very simple schema. The schema will just have like, just a couple of one type and a resolver for now. It's a ping that always returns true. The simplest schema you can think of. Now, once we have that, we need a server. And like I said before, let's separate those two. There's the GraphQL and the GraphQL JS parts, and then there's the server itself. Now, we're going to choose Facify, but this could be Express. It could be run on some cloud functions, whatever you want. So we're going to install Fastify, regular GraphQL, and GraphQL Helix. Because Fastify, we think, is the best, Fastify or Express is the best way to actually handle HTTP and routing and things like that. And GraphQL Helix is a way to handle specific things related to HTTP handling. I'll show you that in a second. So again, we're not wrapping Fastify, you're just using Fastify as is. So you don't need to learn new documentations or new ways to use Fastify. You just use Fastify as is. So you can see here we start a completely new app of Fastify. We're going to handle the get and the post of the URL GraphQL. Everything you see here is regular Fastify. You can just go to the Fastify docs. Everything is regular. There's nothing special GraphQL here until here. What we want first when we use GraphQL is we want to actually have a path of rendering graphical. Everyone knows that. So that's where GraphQL Helix comes in. Instead of writing a lot of different code, GraphQL Helix provides us with like helper functions, like very, very small helper functions that just helps out with it to reduce some code. So, you know, should we render graphical? And if we should, we just render graphical from GraphQL Helix and we run it. So you see here now, we get graphical and that's it. You know, nothing, actually the query didn't work because all we did was rendering graphical. Now, when we don't want to render graphical and actually return data, that's when we actually need GraphQL GS. So here, we're going to get the GraphQL parameters from the request. And again, this is something that GraphQL Helix just provides us with. So we're just using regular Fastify and just getting helper functions from GraphQL Helix. It still brings us the full flexibility and power, but you know, the one-time setup is still very easy, but we get the full flexibility and we're not bound to any framework, and we can update and change and learn nothing new, just the regular, let's say, Fastify or Express or Cloud Functions or whatever. So here, we're going to provide the schema, and we're going to provide everything that's needed. And GraphQL Helix just provides regular GraphQL GS, and it takes the results, and if it's a response, it's just resend back the response. Again, regular Fastify code. All the rest is currently, let's say, not supported. It will be supported in a couple of minutes. So you run the server, and we send a query, and it works. So that's it. That's the whole setup of, we just created a full GraphQL server, but instead of doing it in one line of code and later on regretting it, now we have the full flexibility. Changing from upgrading a Fastify version, changing Fastify to another thing, or from Express to Fastify, deploying this thing into a cloud function, it's all easy. And I didn't lock myself in. And that's it. I have a full GraphQL server with everything I need. But I want to show you much more what you could do with this power. So let's add envelope here. Now the cool thing here is, like, we're not going to use envelope. And the basic thing is we're not going to change anything. So we declare our envelope and we declare the plugins that we want. And we just want to use the schema. So we send the schema into it, and that's it. And then, you know, we get the envelope functions from it, which is exactly the functions that we get from GraphQL GS, the exact same signature. And because GraphQL Helix lets us provide a custom execute, custom context, custom parse, and custom validate, we just pass it through, and everything will work as before. Because envelope has the exact same signature as GraphQL GS and always will be. So what we've done here is we didn't change anything, nothing happened, nothing changed, but now we're using envelope. And that's the power of envelope. So everything is still working, everything is great. Now, let's look at the power of it. So everything is the same, nothing changed, we use the exact same version, but now let's say we want to add a logger. So all we need is to do that. We just get logger, we use logger, and that's it. Now I run the app, I run the server, and you can see here I have in-depth logging of everything that happened on the server.
And that's just with one line of code. Because again, we hook into everything that's happening, into all the functions and all the process that GraphQL GS is doing. So we have more information any information that we want with just one plugin. And that just shows you how powerful plugins are, even though their APIs is super easy. So that's just a start. Let's see what else we could do just by using envelope. So let's add a simple field called secret, and let's write the resolver for it. But let's say the resolver is actually throwing an unexpected error. And that unexpected error is actually going to leak sensitive information. Now, one thing that we want from a GraphQL framework is to prevent these things from happening, right? And it doesn't matter how we create our SDL. So what we want is actually to get error masking, right? If we're going to run this query now and we're going to query the error field, we're basically leaking sensitive information. And that could happen anywhere. So what we want is we want to actually mask all the unexpected errors. So all we need to do is just to use a plugin, and that's it. Now we run. Now we can run the query, and we got an unexpected error without leaking any sensitive information. But the next step for that is what if we get an error that's actually expected. So again, that's super easy. We're just going to use envelope error, and we're going to change that because we expected error. We know this error is expected, and we actually want to send that message into the client. And now, just by doing that, we customized our message, and we got what we wanted. So that's extremely powerful. And again, now we've done it here. You could use that with any framework, whatever setup you want. It's not a separate solution for Apollo Server and then a separate solution for GraphQL Yoga or whatever you're using. It's the same thing across the whole ecosystem. And it's easy. Now, let's talk about tracing. Sentry is an amazing tool. If you're not using it, you should like really check it out. Let's see how easy it is to get powerful metrics and error monitoring on your production servers. So all we need to do is to add the Sentry's SDK and to add the envelope plugin. And then we just add it here, use Sentry, and let's see what's going on. Let's, for example, mimic an error in the database. And again, you know that that error won't get, you see, it's not leaking into the client, but it did happen in production. We want to now know what happened in our monitoring service. So we go right here into Sentry, and we can see the issue, and we can see all the information where it was, and we can have tons of information about that. And not to mention, we have also all the, because we just installed one plugin with one line of code, we get full performance monitoring across everything that's happening in our server, right? From the resolvers until the database. Let's look here. This is an example, but let's look here at GraphQL Hive, which is a service that we provide to our customers, a hosted service, a hosted GraphQL registry. If you don't use it, you should check it out. And what you see here is us using it, how we use envelope and the Sentry plugin. And you can see here we get distribution of the execution, and for each query we get basically a full breakdown of the performance and until the database. So from the resolvers until the database, we can see everything that's happening. It doesn't matter if or in any other services that are using it. So that's extremely powerful, and we just did it by, you see, there's nothing here. It's just basically installing the plugin and putting it on Sentry. And again, it's one way of doing it. You don't need now to repeat yourself anywhere else. And we really think Sentry, by the way, is a very powerful system, and GraphQL Hive is a great tool that expands on them. It gives you more information and connects directly into Sentry as well. So if you're using GraphQL in production, you should really also check out GraphQL Hive. Next, of things that you want to do with your server is actually off. And we think actually that that with envelope is the easiest way to use auth0 with GraphQL. I know it's a big statement, but try it out for yourself. So all we need to do is, again, install the use auth0 plugin. We have a couple of, by the way, plugins for auth. There's a generic auth and all kinds of different providers. Auth0 is amazing. And I'm just going to show you very, very quickly here, how easy it is. You saw we just set it up with one plugin. Now we're trying to use something that is not that we don't have permissions to. We're just exposing here in a very ugly way, a way for us. You can mimic a logging that we get the token for. And now, if we go to GraphQL and get the token and put it in the header, in the request headers, the plugin will do the work and gives us the right thing. And if we're not, it will give us an error. So really check out, if you're using auth0 with your GraphQL servers, really check out the auth0 plugin that Envelope has. Next is, we said that Envelope could actually be also your GraphQL, your Babel to GraphQL. So basically using features that are really valuable, but they're not yet in the officially in the spec, they're just in RFC, and GraphQL JS is not exposing them. One of the very features that we like and use it a lot in production is the one-off directives. Let's see an example. So we're creating a mutation, and mutation has an input field. And the input has actually multiple variables that it could get, a debug and a warning and things like that. But what we really want is, when you actually call that mutation, we don't want you to be able to send multiple input fields or multiple variables. We want you to be able to send only one of them. So if it's debug, it's okay, but if it's warning, that's not supposed to be okay. Now today, there's no way for you to do that validation in the right place, which is the validation phase. You could go to your resolver and write business logic there. But what we want, we actually want to prevent the execution before that. We want to stop it in the validation phase. And that's why Envelope is so powerful, because we actually are hooking into the validation phase of GraphQL JS and still bring back the same signature. So we add Envelope extended validations because we can add many different validations. But out of that, we're actually going to use specific validation, which is the one-off directive. You can see here, we're going to add the one-off directives into our SDL, so GraphQL would understand what is that directive. And then we're just going to do this one-off over this thing. And now, what's going to happen, and we're going to add this validation also to Envelope. So we are going to use the extend validations plugin, and we're going to choose the rules. There's many rules, but again, for now, we're just using the one-off. And we're going to run. And what you see here is now we get an error that exactly one key must be specified for the input type log info. And that happened on the validation phase. So it's like we are having a server that knows exactly what one-off is, and like the spec is already there. So you get to use GraphQL features from the future right now. And we use it a lot. It's extremely beneficial when we go into production, when we go into with clients that has huge schemas. It's a great thing. And it also, by the way, helps us validate things for the working group of GraphQL. So we can give validations from real experience and validate the RFCs much faster. So that's a great thing that we could do. Now, let's take more features from the future. One of the things that are everyone is talking about GraphQL, and it's true, is that when you send a large query, you always get the result that is the slowest. Like, it's slowest as the slowest resolver. So let's say we have now, we have a field here, and the resolve takes time, right? So, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here is that, if we send a query with those two fields, or this specific field, even though we send a ping and ping is faster, it's going to take time. But if we send ping, it's immediately. What if we could maybe defer part of that query, and if the slow field is coming back later, already bring back the ping, and later on when it's ready, bring that as well. And in the meantime, the rendering on the client will be much faster. So that's defer and stream, and we could already use it today. So what you see here is we have a slow string, and it slows the whole query. But now what we could do is we could just use the defer directives, and we're going to send that query in, and what you're going to see, it fails. Why? Because it's not enough that GraphQL GS and Envelope is supporting it. Now we're stuck with the HTTP part, right? With the transport part. And this is another place where you should now be very happy that you're not bound to a framework that is limiting you or wrapping somehow specify, and you can't customize that code, because now it's really easy. We can just add, what if the result is actually multi-part response, because we're going to get a couple of responses back. We're going to write some HTTP code, which you could, by the way, you can import it from like a helper library, subscribe to the result, and now you got a very powerful server that supports stream and defer. You can see here, we're sending the query, and ping arrives immediately, and slow string arrives a bit later. That's extremely powerful. So that's cool. Let's take it another step. One of our members of the guild, Lauren, has actually created a library called Live Query. I'm going to skip all the things here, but let's imagine that we have a reactive source. Maybe it's a reactive database or anything like that. Something that keeps changing and keeps pushing new data. In this case, it's just a simple, for the example, we're just creating an array with a couple of different, with 3 different values. And what we're going to do, we're just going to keep changing these values in memory. So you can think about it as, I don't know, whatever data source that is reactive and keeps changing. So let's create that really quickly. By the way, again, all of this is in the examples folder on Envelope. So check it out if, we're running through things here really, really quickly because there's a lot of things to show. So we're exposing greetings. And greetings, again, is a reactive thing that keeps on changing. So that's really cool because we're using now, experimental GraphQL GS, so we can listen to changes. But what you see here, in order for me to see the changes, I need to send a request and get a response. And then again, I send a request and get a response. And that's cool, but what if GraphQL could push those new values into us? And again, this is another place where you should be really happy that you have full control over it, because now you can just very easily, thanks to GraphQL Helix, you can just define that if you have push, you use event stream. And again, all of these things could, you don't have, by the way, you could use WebSocket or MQTT, but you don't have to. You can also use server-side events. So it's all regular HTTP, and you could support all these powerful features. And again, all of these things, including live queries, we use in production, and it's very hard to explain how powerful those features are, that they always used to be this like features from the future that you could never use, and we use it every day thanks to Envelope and GraphQL Helix. So what you see here is now we created this, we added this into GraphQL Helix into our server, and then we add the live directive because GraphQL just doesn't know by itself, doesn't know about live query yet. And now let's look at what's happening here. So I'm sending greetings, and again, I need to click in order to get updates. But what if I'll put the live query here, the live directives here, and you see the results are being updated and pushed to me by themselves. This is extremely powerful. So let's go back to the slides. So I hope you saw from the examples how powerful envelope could be and is, and for your use case and for whatever use case you want to use. And I hope you try it out. And if you and we have the website and we have the examples. We use those things for productions in production for many months, and we're very, very happy with it. This is, by the way, the signature of a plugin. So just shows you that even though it's very easy to consume a plugin, as plugin creator, you get tons of power and you can hook into anything of the system that you can. And this is why we could create so many powerful plugins and we could share them with the whole community. So to summarize, I think until today there's a status quo of what is required to write a GraphQL server. And then there's all kinds of talks and anecdotes about if you write GraphQL a server in production, you should take care of this and you should take care of that, and there's really cool and interesting articles about it. But I think there wasn't a real solution for it. Everything was you needed to create yourself and customize it. I think now with Envelope, we finally have a server ecosystem that is modern, that is powered by a huge ecosystem of the community, with tons of plugins that you can share no matter what your technology choices are. Because it's a library of the guild, of course, it's well maintained, always up to date, like all of the libraries that we create. And I think if you go into production, you should check out all these things to make sure that you're safe when you're safe and fast and performant when you go into production. So go into envelope.dev. We put a lot of effort in the docs, and we think this will help you a lot. And give us feedback, because all we feed off is feedback from you. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you online and get your feedback. Thank you very much.